Hey, what's up there, listeners? Lars Hedenborg here with another edition of our Business Freedom podcast. Today, we've got Jerimiah Taylor with us, who we were just catching up, and he's achieved a lot in business. So you all are in for an awesome treat. Jerimiah, why don't you start off, kind of just give us a little bit about you personally, and our listeners want to get you to know you as a person, and then give like the minute or two summary of your 19 years in the various businesses. So kind of just set the stage for us a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So it's Jeremiah Taylor. I am 36 years old. I'll be 37. So I'm the tail end of the millennial group. In fact, here at Loan Depot Mellow Home, I'm the token millennial executive. So I tell everybody else how the millennials are going to respond. I've been in real estate mortgage 18 years. I've done every job in a mortgage company, including own one, including put one out of business. And I've sold about 1,500 homes as a real estate agent, still run a real estate team down in Tucson, Arizona, active real estate investor. I've launched a couple of real estate-based tech startups, some massively unsuccessful and some a little bit more successful. And then also operated a couple of real estate franchises. And today I spend my time at Loan Depot and Mellow Home. We're the second largest non-bank consumer lender in the country. We fund a lot of mortgages, and we do it all primarily digitally. And as a human, I hang out with my kid. Her name's Madison. She's 9. We like to play tennis and golf. And my wife, Gina, and we live here in sunny Southern California. We're super blessed to be here.
I like that. As a human, this is what I do versus the other parts of me that are operating in probably a crazy AI digital, futuristic world. So let me ask you, before we get going, are you prepared to share the good, the bad, the ugly about your business growth journey?
Absolutely, Lars.
Awesome. And I think there's a lot of value in some of the suffering and failures, and you've done a lot. And so 36 years old, and you are 18 years in. So half your life has been spent doing the thing you're going to share with us.
Yeah. I've never thought of it that way. That's a little scary. I feel like I should do something different tomorrow.
You're probably just ready to retire. You should. Yeah. Half your life in business, you're good to go. Yeah. So awesome. So let's start off, kind of get the motivational ball rolling with, you've achieved a lot in business in every position, in probably on the mortgage side and the real estate side. Has there been a success quote that has kind of kept your spirits up over the years?
I think there's one that I always go back to, and it's interesting because I heard it first from my grandmother. My grandmother was in real estate. She ran and operated some Chevy dealerships. And when I was little, she always told me, Jeremiah, if you learn to sell, you'll never want for anything a day in your life. And I just took that serious. And so I've always been a salesperson. I identify as a salesperson, and I think it's an important tactic to be able to understand people and help them see things your way.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. And what was her background? She was involved in car dealerships and
real estate. So I'm 4th generation real estate.
That's awesome. So take us back to, I'm trying to think of which part of your business growth journey I want to pick on a little bit. Take us back to when it sounds like you went from mortgages to real estate, right? And then going from probably were a solo agent to figuring out that was really hard, to building a team and then doing it as a team. Take us back to that solo agent, doing it all and kind of growing from there, and talk about the phases of, let's kind of deconstruct the phases of growth. And, you were probably thoroughly prepared for every phase. You were, had all the systems in place and it all ran smoothly. But take us back to that, like the lowly real estate agent, and how did you grow a business beyond that?
So it's an important part of the story is why I got out of the mortgage industry. And so my mom was a mortgage broker, and I was a mechanic at the time at a high performance car place. And she was tired of me being greasy. And so she said, look, come process my loans. I'll pay you more than you make there, and you can go to school. And pretty quickly I saw what everybody else in real estate made. And I said, heck, that's better than anything I'd make. I'll just do that. Then I can buy the cool cars. And I started, and what I found over time is that my mom and I were misaligned in what we wanted in the company. She wanted to work really hard and make a good living and really kind of live the life of like that solo agent with maybe an assistant. And I wanted to go build a business. And over time, we kind of diverged there. And 2008, 9, and 10 really helped us make a decision to close the company. And when we did that, at the time I have a 1-year-old little girl, and I'm thinking, gosh, what are we going to do? And my genius idea is I'm going to go sell real estate. And so my first full-time year, myself, and then I brought on a showing assistant, we sold 54 houses. And the interesting thing for me is I was always natural to just get on the phone. And the reason I got my real estate license in the beginning was because as an originator, I was getting on the phone and generating buyer and seller leads and then referring them to agents that didn't do anything with them. And so then I just got my license, and with like my first year with a license, while I was also running the mortgage company, I sold 27 houses. And I was just doing them at the same time. The thinking shift really happened after I went to Keller Williams, and I went to an event called Family Reunion. And at Family Reunion, I saw these guys on stage that were selling 100, 200, 300, 1,000 houses. And I had this like huge limiting belief in my head around, that's impossible. How could you do that? Because I looked at the way that I did it, and I said, I'm working 100 hours a week. There's no more time in the day for them to do more than I'm doing. And it was really confrontational to see like there's somebody doing way more than me, orders of magnitude more than me, and I feel like I'm putting in my all. And I think there was a big breakthrough there that working harder wasn't necessarily the answer, and that starting to understand leverage through people and marketing to generate business was what was going to change the game.
Yeah, so let's deconstruct it a little bit. So I think it's like less than 15% of real estate agents have an assistant, have any administrative support whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting, comment you make there. Take us from that. So it sounds like you left loans, you went full-time real estate with a buyer agent, did 50 something sides. Talk about like next hires. How did your schedule evolve? Did you surround yourself with like-minded, just as committed to prospecting? Were you the shark, they were the feeder fish, or were you all sort of swimming in the same direction? There's a lot of value knowing that most of the folks that are going to listen to this don't have an admin and they're a solo agent. How can we help them through those first couple steps and what you might have done differently?
So there's a really core fundamental that I think a lot of people miss in building a team, and that's that the only reason to build a team is because you have more business than you can handle. Like I see all these agents that they go out and they try to recruit a bunch of other agents thinking, well, if I just add this agent to my team, they're going to have 6 friends that buy a house this year. So that's 6 more transactions I get paid on. And theoretically that kind of works, but in practice, you're setting something up that's going to fall apart. And so the core is like even last year, which by the way, the last listing appointment I went on was in August of 2012. And we've done at least 120 transactions a year, every year since 2013 till now. So the quick math says that's like 800 home sales where I've gotten paid on them. They've been done under my name by my team, and I haven't been a part of them. The key to that though is of those 800, kind of a wild guess would be that about 770, 750 were my leads that I generated through my marketing efforts or through my database that then in turn I handed over. And so that was really the key that started it, was an ability to generate leads and a willingness to make some calculated bets on digital lead spend and let the business run as a business and not just take all the income out to fund my lifestyle. Yeah.
And it's funny that you say that. I mean, a lot of the teams now, you're right. It started by someone who did 20 sides last year and they're starting this team. They have this vision of even the expansion within KW. is like, I'm going to expand. We've got an expansion agent in our market center, and the dude has like 4 listings. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what do you expand? You're not expanding. You're just sort of like, and he's in another country. And I'm like, oh, your life must be horrible, dude.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way you have it together because your core business is not tight.
Yeah. And that was a mistake I made. I mean, the first year that I started to build a team, I was doing, as a solo agent, I did almost 190,000 in gross commissions. And, net a really high percentage of that because I was solo. Then the first year I had a team, we went from 190 to like 260,000. So we didn't get a big jump in GCI, but now all of a sudden I split half of it with somebody. And that was like a punch in the face because then on top of that, I hired an admin and now I was spending money to generate leads. And that first like 2 years, I didn't just like not make the same. I went way backwards in what we were investing in the business to make more money. And I think that's a pain point most agents fail to see, that like if you're going to grow something, it takes a heck of a lot more effort to grow it than to sustain it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a buddy of mine recently said, and it was an analogy to health. He said, it's hard to get in shape, but it's easy to stay in shape.
Mm-hmm.
So once you build, you need to build the momentum yourself personally, and then you sort of stay in shape over the years, which is what you've done with your real estate team. And it's funny, you mentioned my last closing was January 2012. And so I had pulled out of production the year before, and I just had one closing that sort of carried over. And I think it was that year we did like 450 sides, and it was on an economic model where it was like 67% gross margin. And I was totally out of production, so that's another side of it. I want to touch on it because you just mentioned it. And it's sort of a teaching, a lesson, I think, for a lot of people that are listening. It's what economic model, like, when you went from 190 to 260 and you had an agent and then an admin, and then expenses on top of that, overhead and marketing and advertising. Was that a thoughtful, did you set it up right? Would you have, okay, so why don't you walk us through that? What would you have done differently? I think a lot of team leaders, they provide more value than they think. They overpay. They don't think about their economic model or splits. Talk through some of that.
So I think in hindsight, I would have stayed in production longer personally. I dove out of the buyer side really fast and just focused entirely on listings. In hindsight, I would have spent more time with a showing assistant and building cash reserves, because cash is king in this business, and the market can penalize you pretty quickly, and you don't notice it, especially as you start carrying a bigger expense load. So where I started was, I was like everybody else. I went out and I hired 5 buyer's agents, and I started spending $5,000 a month on pay-per-click, and I didn't even have an admin. My genius idea was, I'll be the admin and you all can do all the production. And obviously that didn't work, right? Like 8 months later, I think I had to fire everybody and go, I got to start selling houses again because I have a mortgage. So when I retooled it the second time, and there's been a bunch of different comp iterations, but when I retooled it the second time, I went to kind of a more traditional model that we pay 50-50 on the buyer side. In the beginning, I was paying even more than that, and then 10% on the listing side. Tucson's a really interesting market because our average sales price is super low. It's like $165,000. So when you start talking about percentages, it takes a lot of transactions to add up to a little bit of money. And so you've got to be super careful. But then the other side of that is, when I spent time in San Diego, we have a small team there. And what I realized is I'm way better off if I can do it from a cash flow perspective to pay salaries. So now that's what we've started to do with our team, is that our core team members are on salaries. So they get a $2,000 or $3,000 a month salary. And then they get paid out like 10% if they find a listing, and 25% if they sell a buyer. And it really works better for everybody because it takes the commission highs and lows out of it for them, but then it moves my margins up, where in typically a market where the average sales price is really low, I'm able to carry a healthier margin.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, let's talk about that next level of growth. So when you're still doing productions, you retooled, you fire everyone, rehire the right way into the right split model. And then you're looking to, what was your next step? Like what drove you out of that business where it was going to run itself? What was pulling you away? Where'd you go?
So within really 24 months of selling real estate full time, I was doing 100 transactions a year with basically myself and one other person. Um, and so I had myself and then Veronica and Todd. Todd was our executive assistant. Veronica handled the buyers and I took the listings. And that in 2012 was the last year I was producing. We closed and pended like 175 deals. And I just had this thought of like, if I'm going to do this and work this hard, I should go do it somewhere where the houses are more expensive. So we moved to San Diego. And it's funny because I hear a lot of people talk about that, and I think I'm the only idiot that actually did it. There's probably a few other people, but we up and we moved. And the interesting thing is during that move, I met a guy by the name of Chris Heller, and Chris goes, "Well, hey, I have this market center. You know, running a market center is just like running a team." And the financials kind of made sense. And we created a deal where I could have the same upside to run his market center. And I could keep my team. And so it worked out. So I ended up taking over for him, and I was a team leader for 5.5 years. And that's what took me out of the business. So again, having it to do over, I would have stayed in production a lot longer and really built a solid foundation. Now, luckily, I have had Veronica all along, which Veronica was my mentor as a new agent. So the first 40 houses I sold, I paid her 50% of because I wanted to learn. And so she's, 17 years, 15 years later, however long I've been licensed, she's still with me. She runs the team in Arizona today, and we still have a great relationship. And the challenge has changed where now my job is to create opportunity for her. She continues to do a good job. It's like, okay, what's next? What's next?
All right. So this is going to be a unique, that I haven't had the chance to speak with somebody yet on the podcast. And I think you bring a unique perspective, and it's really where your energy is focused today. Let's just talk about what's broken with the real estate industry. And we could probably spend like a few hours doing it over many, many drinks. But if we had 5 minutes to do it, like what are the 2 or 3 things, not only like broken historically, but what are you, in your bigger role in the business world now, what do you see that's broken, and what are you doing to fix it?
I think there's a massive lack of transparency, right? And so in everything else in life, technology has created a ton of transparency around the process. And real estate and mortgage and really almost consumer financing in general still seems to be a little bit of a black box to the average person. And so looking at that, it creates this funky experience where it's like we're the gatekeeper and they're the person wanting to get in, and you're just going to pay our price to get in. As a real estate agent, working in Tucson gave me a really interesting perspective because our average commission was about $5,000. And I see what agents do in the more expensive markets, the San Diegos and places like that. And they do incrementally more and incrementally better work, but they get paid exponentially more to do it. And when I look at the market and I see these guys like Purple Bricks and Redfin with the 1% listing offerings coming in, and agents like their hair lights on fire when they see that and they get upset. And I'm like, well, yeah, your gravy train is coming to an end. If you're delusional enough to think that those days weren't numbered at some point, sorry for you, but the reality is the rest of the country sells houses for $5,000 to $6,000 a pop. And yes, you're selling more expensive houses, but you're not doing exponentially more work. And that's just like the law of the universe, right? Is you get rewarded for the amount of value that you bring. And as technology flattens the playing field and gives the consumer more transparency, they're naturally going to ask more questions. And so in a couple of weeks, I'm going to go talk to a big group of agents here in Southern California. And the crux of the talk is get prepared to remargin your business. And you need to figure out how to make it work on a $6,000 average commission. And if you can do that, you've got a business for a long time.
Yeah. So let's dig into that more. So what do you think the spread, what do you think will look like? Because there will be folks that will do it for 2 grand, and then there will be agents that, so let's take my market, for example. Our average commission check is, it's not the average in the market, but we're at $10,000 average per commission check.
Yeah.
And so if people come into our market and they're willing to do that $300,000 home for, $3,000, 1%. What advice would you give someone? Our stance is to go premium, where we just want to be a Mercedes or, a Disney or something that someone is willing to sit across from someone who is just a differentiated advisor, and really provide it, not just say, like a lot of agents say that, yeah, I'm an expert advisor, actually be it. What advice would you give to a team like that?
So I think you guys are on the right track, right? Because ultimately the consumer is going to drive the bus. So if what your consumer is saying is if your consumer is saying they want a premium experience and they're willing to pay for it, and that's something you can deliver, then rock and roll, do that and increase the price, right? Like I shop at Nordstrom, and I'm proud to say I shop there and pay more for the experience and the ability to text the dude that already knows what size shoes and style that I like, because it makes my life easy. And there's always going to be that consumer. And something I heard once upon a time that was really smart was, take the time now to pick your market. Otherwise, your market's going to pick you, and you're just going to become the sum of the averages of the people that you surround yourself with. So if your goal is to be a premium service provider, there are people that are going to do it. And interestingly enough, in the brokerage I ran, typically the agents that did the most transactions also charged the highest as a percentage of the sales price. And so, but they also provided a ton of value. And it was interesting. I had an agent that did almost 200 transactions in Southern California. It was like 4 million gross commission. And his value proposition was he would do seminars and he would teach sellers how to maximize their value. And he went out, he bought about $500,000 worth of furniture, and he would come in and effectively flip that consumer's house for free. But guess what? They never pushed back on the 3.5% or 4% listing commission that he charged on their $1 million house because he was adding so much value. Yeah. So it was a good demonstrable of somebody that figured out their market, created a niche, and created a premium service. And I think the consumer wants that. There's a segment that want that, but there's also a segment that are like, well, so what? I'll use my iPhone. I'll take some pictures. I want to post it on a website. And it's the same guy that's going to change his own oil, sell his own car, right? Yeah. And there's segments, and we'll all have a place to live. The key is that you've got to be realistic about your consumer. And it's funny because it's like the middle tier agents that sell 10 or 12 houses a year in SoCal that make 30, 40, 50 grand a pop because they're all $1.5 million, that they get pissed off when the other agent is offering free staging and free painting and all this other add value service. And they want to get mad at them when it's like, don't get mad at them. Just realize you're either going to have to compete with them or reduce your price. That's economics 101.
Yeah, that's interesting. How was it moving into a market where I've heard the San Diego market is it's completely saturated? It's like one agent for, 4 agents for every listing or something crazy.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I'll just draw a parallel back to Tucson. In Tucson, we would sell about 10,000 houses, 11,000 houses a year, and there's roughly 6,000 people with a license. In San Diego, they'll sell this year about 35,000 houses, and there's about 38,000 people with a license. Mm-hmm. So the numbers are definitely skewed. The interesting thing, though, about San Diego is of those 38,000, only about 15,000 actually pay their dues to be an ongoing board member. And there's a lot more agents that, your Uber driver will have a license in California, almost guaranteed. And they'll talk to you about listing or buying a house, even though they're not set up with the association or anything. And then as a contingency to writing your offer, they'll go run and sign up. And then that'll be their one transaction for the year. And there's a ton of that. And I think that's part of the transparency issue in our industry is there's no central resource, and our industry representation in AR fights like hell to keep it so that there's no central resource to go through to determine what agent does this as a living and what agent is practicing.
Yeah. Because if you had one home a month as the minimum qualification to keep your license, it would drive 85% of agents out of the business, and every MLS would implode.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so in San Diego, that number is 12,500. There's 12,500 agents that sell 15 or more houses annually in San Diego out of 38,000 people with a license. And when you look at dues revenue, that means that there's 36,500 people that pay roughly $1,000 a year between the state and local dues. So there's just too much money in it to change it. So I'm not a big, I'm kind of pessimistic when it comes to the industry changing that way. I think it's just going to be natural selection. But it's also a good thing because it leaves the consumer better served. It creates transparency and more options.
Yeah, awesome. Let's transition to some of your business failures. I think there's a lot of value in sharing some things that you might have done differently, some tougher times, where it wasn't so much fun or you considered maybe even giving up. What's one or two of those lessons that you can sort of look back on in your business journey that were just tough times?
Yeah, I think everybody has lots of these, right? And I'm trying to think of the top two on the fly is a little tough. I think number one, Gary Keller says it, who you're in business with matters. And what I mean by that is talent will make you, right? And talent will make a crappy leader look really smart. But then a misalignment of talents, if you have talented people and y'all aren't aligned on the same thing, man, that can hurt because talented people can do some damage that untalented people don't because they're motivated and they want to go do something. So when you're in this talent hunt, you want to also look for alignment, and create a business plan that has multi-year to it. I think a lot of people in real estate, they look at the next 6 months or the next quarter where when I talk to our financial plan and analysis guys at Loan Depot, they're looking at 5 and 10-year deals. And a lot of times an employee coming into an existing company that's getting stock options, they don't even vest out. The first 12 months, they get zero. And then months 12 through 60 is their vesting schedule. And I think real estate could learn a lot from traditional business for just looking at the longer game and not looking short.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you spend your time on this week? What does this week look for you? What are you just thinking about how you're going to crush the future of the world, or you got work to do every day? What do you focus on?
So right now, a big problem that we're trying to solve for Loan Depot is capacity with loan officers, right? So if you look at the big three for digital lead buy in mortgage, it's Loan Depot, Quicken, and Wells Fargo. But basically, those three companies buy 90+% of the digital lead universe that exists for purchase leads. So now the question is, we have the money to buy all the leads, but do we have the manpower, the loan officer staff, the agents, everybody to go out and fulfill them? And so that's a big part of what we work on every day at Loan Depot in Mellow Home is, how can we create the digital plumbing to, and it's a good reference term, but it's not exactly what we're doing, to Uberize loan officers in real estate. We still think relationships are the most important thing, but today's consumer, a lot of them really want an on-demand experience. And when they're a digital shopper, they want an on-demand experience. And so where we've been able to differentiate is 2 weeks ago, we set a new record for our company. We went from a digital lead, we called the lead, we converted them, we got them pre-qualified, we found a local agent, we paired them with the agent, and then the agent knew of a property that they had coming to market that they showed that person that afternoon. And in under 4 hours, we went from an internet lead to in contract. And the consumer's feedback was, I've been working on this home search for 7 months. and nobody could show me the house that I wanted. It didn't exist. And not only did you guys find the agent that knew of the inventory, but you gave me a loan to go with it, and I'm going to be living in the house inside of 30 days.
Now that person is obviously now a testimonial on like the cover of your website.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That's really impressive. And you, as the initial point of contact, you didn't know this agent yet necessarily, or did you?
We do. So we have about 2,500 agents now that are part of our Mellow Home referral network. And so we'll continue to grow that number. And so what we do is we take the consumer and we get them pre-qualified first. And once they're pre-qualified, we ask some questions around what they're looking for. And then in our database, we look and match with an agent. And then when they overlay, we send a text out to the agents, and in real time, we're able to connect the consumer and the agent by kind of using our own matching algorithm that we're developing every day.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. One thing most business owners struggle with, and I think I've gotten a little better at it over the last couple or 3 years, but it's enjoying the ride. Business, if you're the guy that's going to decide you're just going to compete in an industry and not do a job, it's hard. Especially if you have a child, if you have a wife you want to keep happy, you want to have a friend here or there, whatever. What practices have you put in place to kind of appreciate the journey?
That's a great question, and something that I had a lot of challenges with, because I'm wired for competition. If somebody says I'm going to beat you at that, I will dedicate my life to winning, and never ask the question, is this something that's worth winning at? And so I spent about 1.5 years in coaching with Ron and Kate Patulski's group through MAPS called Transformational Coaching, really working on just turning down that chatter in my head. And so there's a lot of things you can do. Like there's an audio program called HoloSync that I think a lot of people are into, that run in those circles, that it's just about taking out the highs and lows and understanding it's all part of the journey, and that on the other side of every win is a setback, and on the other side of every setback is a win. And so you've got to, I think in today's world, because it's so digital, that you almost have to combine the two. It's like people are looking for, I want to work and then I want a vacation. It's like, well, why can't life just be a vacation that I actually work at and enjoy? So yeah, I show up in the office most days, but we have a second home in Arizona, and probably 6 or 7 weeks this year, I'll just work remote. I'll be hanging out by the pool, watching the kids swim, and I may dive in between meetings. And that kind of corporate culture, I think, is becoming more and more normal, that, people want to have a life, but they also got a lot to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Cool. I'm just going to throw some rapid fire questions at you, and let's see what you come up with. What keeps you up at night when it comes to your business?
Indecision.
Okay. What about when you're building a team, or even in the world you're in now, what are you most afraid of?
It's such a good question. Probably not, when you have partners, and this doesn't happen a lot in real estate, but when you have partners and you end up in these partner deadlocks where nobody wants to make a decision, that's like a death spiral for the business. And so it's something that 6 months ago I didn't even know I would be afraid of, that I worry about. That because now I'm doing so many different things with so many different people, and I'm counting on them to make decisions and move things forward, that if they don't keep the ball rolling, the business can stop.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's the best advice you ever received about business?
That not every business is worth growing. We all have the same amount of time. And it was a conversation with a guy by the name of James Casciola. And he's a venture guy, sold a company for about $65 million. And I talked to him and I said, isn't this a great idea? Look, we could make like $2 million a year doing this. And if we did this, we might get that to like 8 million. He just looks at me and he goes, Jeremiah, do you know how much Jet A costs just to get around the country? Like, that's just not even investable. I mean, maybe if you could get to 50 or 60 million, it'd be a good lifestyle business. But unless it's doing 200 to 300 million in revenue, it's just not investable in my book. And it was just shock for me. It caused me to rethink things, right? Because it takes just as much work and time to invest your time in a little business as it does a big one.
Yeah, that's awesome. Talk about like, thanks.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I mean, one person's sort of big dream, big thinking is another person's like, dude, I don't touch anything under 100 million. It's like, what?
Yeah.
This is a $10 million business. Like, how can you,
Yeah.
It's only 10 million, right? We're global. We're trillion dollar economy. How about a daily, personal daily or weekly habit that you believe has contributed to your success?
For me, it's just quiet time in the morning. I read the book A Miracle Morning probably 7 years ago, and I don't necessarily subscribe to everything in there, but even when I don't have anything to do, I'm up by 5 and just hanging out on the couch, quiet time, reading. Like I read Pocket. I don't know if you guys use or pay attention to that. Basically, it aggregates a bunch of different news feeds off the internet and gives you some good Cliffs notes. There's another good one called The Hustle that kind of gives you some good stuff. And then there's another one called Blinkist that they take good like recent business books and they just make everything super digestible. So for me, I make sure I get like 30 minutes to an hour every morning by myself, quiet. Like that's my time to do whatever I want. Some days I want to play Candy Crush. And some days I'm like amped in and working on spreadsheets, but it's my time. And that's super important for me.
Awesome. Is there any kind of app or, internet resource or something that you've been turned on to lately that's getting you excited?
I've been playing a lot with these fintech apps. I think they're kind of cool. So there's a new one called Titan. It's a couple of hedge fund guys that came off of Wall Street that are now doing investments all the way down to like $1,000. And these are typically unless you have $5 million, they won't manage your money, guys. And so it's cool, again, to see financial services come to the average person that we can get the returns and have access to those tools. So I think that there's Titan, there's Acorns, there's Mint. That's where I've been playing a lot recently. It's just financial services apps.
Awesome. Cool. How about let's take a real estate agent that's looking to scale a small team or something like that. What's one book, a foundational book you'd recommend for them?
Yeah, I think it as old as it is, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent still sets the tone for the business. But I would also encourage them to look at some business books like the E-Myth and the 4-Hour Work Week. Because if you can take, like, a lot of agents are really good quarterbacks, but they're really crappy coaches. And the difference is that the coach at no time is ever going to yank their headset off, go push the quarterback out of the way and take a snap, right? That's just not their role. But as a business leader, that's what a lot of people want to do is they're like, oh, you're not doing a great job. Get out of the way. Let me show you how this is done. And there's almost a sense of pride in it. But it's like, congratulations, you just paid somebody while you did their job. And I think that's the part that's missing out of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent is it's so focused on net as a percentage of gross income that it under leverages people and it teaches them how to be a practitioner more than a leader. So then mixing in some leadership books to back it up would be really good.
Yeah. Awesome. Jeremiah, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Oh man, I don't know that I would. I mean, sure, I could go back, and I'm bummed that we closed our mortgage company because that was a good opportunity, and knowing what I know now, it would continue to run. To look at something globally, I think I would pay more attention at the beginning of new endeavors to slow down understanding if it's something I really want to do. Like the things where I've lost the most money or had the most headache or heartache were because I got really excited and I let the excitement drive the bus about getting started. And had I slowed it down and asked more questions and got more advice from people like you that have walked before me, I probably wouldn't have started some of the things that I started, and I would have more money in the bank and less stress.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, our time together, a lot of folks really in loans and real estate agents are struggling, for a whole lot of different reasons. What words of encouragement would you give them?
What, and it's a little cliche, but what you do every day ultimately drives your success. And what you do from time to time is basically meaningless. And so the key today, if I'm coaching any real estate agent in the country today that's struggling, I'm going to get them to create a dashboard. And it's really about, let's just get real about how fast you're going. If you're talking to 8 people a day, that's cool. Talk to 8 people a day, but realize you're going to get paid like you're talking to 8 people a day. And awareness is the secret sauce to this market, because it does take more work today to make the same amount of money. And that's not going to get better. It's going to get worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about especially where you're going with immersing yourself in a technology solution. There's still agents that are like, I don't think a dialer's for me. It's like, really? Yeah. Like, really? You want to manually? No, I don't want to manually dial a phone either. I just don't think any of it's for me. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Let me take all your clients.
Yeah. That's okay. Money doesn't have to be for everybody either.
Yeah. I want to get your take on this. This is the last thing. Spending a little bit of time with Tony Robbins, he's big on psychology. His quote about, business is 80% psychology mindset and then 20% tactics, strategy, tools. How has that played out for you as you've sort of just stepped from endeavor to endeavor?
Yeah. So it's 100% true. For me, I'm just like too dumb to think that I can't do anything. And so that's part of that slowing it down and thinking in the beginning part is it's not always a worthwhile endeavor that I'm going to go win at. So for me, I've never had an issue of thinking, can I do it? It's always, how can I do it? However, I hired over 1,000 real estate agents in a term of 5 years. And the core differentiator between the ones that nailed it and the ones that went running home with their tail between their legs was squarely between their ears. And the number of those people that I would sit in front of and they would go, well, Jeremiah, open houses don't work for me. And I'd say, well, great. Well, why is that? And they'd go, well, I was talking to Susie at the coffee maker and she told me about the time that somebody was weird and, looked at her feet or whatever. And so I just know they're not going to be for me. And I'm like, so how many have you done? And they go, well, I've never done one, but I don't want anybody to look at my feet because they did that to them. And I'm like, I can't help you. But that's how a lot of people live their life, is they just look for that confirmation that something is or isn't going to work for them. They believe it is true. They don't question anything. And that's just reality.
That's awesome. How could someone reach out to you if they wanted to learn more about what you're up to?
The easiest way is to just email me. Our website is jtaylorrealtor.com. Or you can also email me at jtaylor@jtaylorrealtor.com. And that's it. Easy to get a hold of me.
Cool. Yeah, this has been an interesting time. I appreciate your openness. Cool that you're running something. That's ultimately my dream, is to be in Hilton Head running my businesses and on the beach and at the pool. So awesome on that. Is there anything I can do for you? Let me know. Real Estate B School, thanks to you. Our listeners, thank you. And just appreciate your time today, brother.
All right. Thanks, Lars. Good to see you.
All right. Thank you.